In a warm West African village where the red earth clung to sandals and the palm trees whispered gossip to the wind, everyone believed one thing. A home is sacred. But the village also believed something else, something older, something quieter, something that lived in the space between daylight and moonlight. Cruelty never sleeps, it waits. Nia had learned that early. Her mother died when she was small, gone like rain that falls hard and disappears before you can gather it. Her father, broken but trying, remarried a woman named Madame Sod, who arrived with her daughter Binta like a storm that pretended to be a blessing. At first, Madame Sod smiled too much, like a person selling sweetness that wasn't real. But after Nia's father passed away from a sudden fever, the smiles disappeared. And that was when the real story began, because the moment Nia's father was buried, Madame Sod looked at her the way a hungry fire looks at dry grass. Not with love. With ownership. With calculation. With quiet hatred. From that day on, Nia became a shadow in her own home. She cooked. She swept. She fetched water until her arms ached. She washed clothes at the river until her fingers wrinkled like old leaves. And when she finally lay down at night, Madame Sod would call her again. Nia. Did you clean behind the cooking stones? Nia. Did you wash Binta's wrapper? Nia. Did you scrape the bottom of the pot? And Binta, the stepsister, would laugh. Lazy girl, Binta would say, while lying on a mat, chewing roasted ground nuts like a queen. The village women noticed. They always noticed. But people feared Madame Sod's tongue. Her mouth could cut deeper than a knife. So many watched and said nothing. Nia endured. Because she believed if she stayed quiet, if she stayed kind, if she stayed patient, life would change. But life didn't change. Not until Kofi came. Kofi was known in the nearby towns, a hardworking man with straight eyes and a good name. He was not rich like a chief, but he was the kind of man people trusted with money, with secrets, and with children. He traded fine cloth and kola nuts. Sometimes he sold carved stools, and sometimes he traveled with farmers to bring goods to bigger markets. One market day, Nia went to sell palm oil for Madame Sod. Her wrapper was plain. Her sandals were worn. Her hair was wrapped neatly, nothing fancy. She stood by her small calabash, watching people bargain and laugh. And then, like a drumbeat that changes the whole dance, Kofi appeared. He wasn't loud. He didn't push. He simply walked, and the air around him felt steady. He stopped at Nia's table and pointed to her palm oil. "This one," he said, "looks pure." Nia lowered her eyes politely. "Yes, sir." He studied her face like he was trying to understand a story he had never heard before. "What is your name?" "Nia." "Nia," he repeated softly, as if testing the sound. "And you sell this every market day?" She hesitated. I help my family." Kofi nodded slowly, and for some reason, his eyes became serious. He paid without arguing. He added extra coins. Nia blinked. "Sir, it's too much." He shook his head. "No. It is respect." Then he turned as if leaving, but paused. "May the road rise for you, Nia." And he walked away. Nia stood still, coins warm in her palm, confused by a kindness that didn't come with strings. She didn't know that at the same time, Binta had seen everything. And Binta's heart, already full of envy, began to boil. Back home, Madame Sod noticed the extra coins immediately. "Where did this money come from?" she demanded. Nia answered honestly. "A man bought palm oil and paid extra, Mama." Madame Sod's eyes narrowed. "A man?" Binta stepped forward, eager. "Mama, it was Kofi. I saw him. He spoke to her like she was somebody." Madame Sod's face changed in an instant. Not anger first. Something worse. Opportunity. Kofi, Madam Sod murmured. The cloth trader from the next town. Binta nodded quickly, smoothing her dress. Yes. He is handsome too. Strong shoulders. Clean skin. Madam Sod's lips curled. Then she looked at Nia and spoke like honey with poison inside. So the man likes you? Nia quickly shook her head, frightened. No, Mama. He just bought palm oil. But Madam Sod didn't believe in coincidence. She believed in control. From that day, she began to treat Nia differently, not kinder, but more strategic. She forced Nia to do even more work, so Nia would look tired and small. She denied her good clothing, so Nia would seem unworthy. And she dressed Binta like a festival doll every market day. Wear the beads, she told her daughter, oil your skin. Smile softly, not too hard. Men like a woman who looks like she belongs to comfort. Binta became a walking performance. But every market day, Kofi didn't even look at her. He looked for Nia. He asked for Nia's table. He greeted Nia respectfully. He spoke to Nia gently. And Nia, confused but touched, found herself smiling back. When Kofi finally asked Nia if he could visit her home properly, like a man with intentions, Nia's heart nearly fell out of her chest. But fear held her mouth because she knew what Madam Sod would do. So she said quietly, Sir, it is not easy. Kofi's eyes softened. Nothing good is easy, Nia. But I will come. Properly. And he did. Kofi arrived with elders, his uncle, his cousin, and a respected older woman carrying kola nuts. The village noticed. When a man comes with elders, it means one thing. Marriage intentions. Madam Sod welcomed them with a smile so wide it could fool the sun. My house is honored, she declared. Please sit. Nia remained in the back, shaking like a leaf in Hametan wind. Kofi stood and spoke respectfully. I have come to ask for the hand of Nia. Silence dropped like a heavy cloth. Madam Sod blinked once. Binta's jaw tightened. Then Madam Sod laughed, too loudly. Nia, she repeated, pretending confusion. You mean, my daughter Binta? Kofi's expression didn't change. No, madam. I mean Nia. Madam Sod's smile froze. She tried again. Young men sometimes confuse faces. Binta is here. Beautiful. Ready. Kofi's voice remained calm. Madam, I did not mistake. I know who I came for. Binta stepped forward, forcing a sweet laugh. Kofi, you don't know me well. If you choose me, you will be happy. Kofi looked at her the way a man looks at a door that is not his house. No, he said simply. That single word slapped Binta's pride so hard it shook her spirit. Madam Sod quickly spoke, we will discuss. Please eat. Let us talk. But inside her, something snapped. Because to Madam Sod, Nia was not supposed to win. Not in love. Not in life. Not in anything. That night, after the visitors left, Madam Sod turned on Nia like a leopard. You think you are better than my daughter, she hissed. Nia fell to her knees. No, Mama. I didn't. You are a beggar in my house. Madam Sod shouted. You will not become a wife in this village while my daughter remains unmarried. Binta screamed, tears falling. Mama, she stole him. She stole him. Nia whispered, I never asked for. Madam Sod grabbed her by the arm. From tomorrow, you will suffer until you forget your own name. And Nia did not tell Kofi. Because Nia believed silence would keep peace. But silence only feeds evil. From that day, Madam Sod doubled Nia's work. She woke her before the rooster. She sent her to fetch water twice, even when the calabash was full. She forced her to grind pepper until her eyes burned. She made her carry firewood so heavy her shoulders bruised. And if Nia slowed down, Binta would sneer. Future bride, hurry up. Sometimes they refused to let Nia go to the market so Kofi wouldn't see her. When Kofi came to visit, Madam Sod would lie. She went to the river. She is sick. She traveled to her aunt. But Kofi wasn't a foolish man. He started noticing how Nia's eyes looked heavier each time he did catch her. How her hands had new cuts. How her smile was trying too hard. One afternoon, he came earlier than expected. And what he saw made his blood turn. He saw Nia behind the house, scrubbing pots while Binta sat nearby eating sweet mango. And Madam Sod, standing over Nia, dumped dirty water back into a pot and said, "Wash it again. You missed a spot." Nia's hands trembled. Kofi stepped forward. Madam Sod jumped like she'd seen a spirit. "Kofi. Oh. Welcome." Kofi didn't greet her. He looked at Nia. "Is this how you live?" Nia opened her mouth, but fear locked her throat. Madam Sod rushed in. No, she likes work. She is stubborn. She insists." Kofi raised one hand. "Enough." His voice wasn't loud. But it carried power. He turned to Nia again. "I asked you a question." Nia's eyes filled with tears she had been swallowing for too long. I didn't want to cause trouble," she whispered. Kofi's jaw tightened. Madam Sod forced a laugh. "Young people are sensitive. It is discipline. In this house." Kofi cut her off. "In my home, the woman I marry will not be treated like a slave." Then he said something that made Madam Sod's heart drop. "I will return tomorrow with my elders." Madam Sod's smile shook. Because she understood what that meant. Kofi was not asking anymore. He was preparing to take Nia away. So that night, under moonlight, Madam Sod visited someone the villagers feared. An old woman living at the edge of the forest, beneath tall trees that looked like they had been standing since the first story ever told. When Madam Sod arrived, she brought gifts, salt, cloth, and dried fish. Grandmother Imani stared at her for a long time. "What do you want?" the old woman asked. Madam Sod lowered her voice. "I need help." Grandmother Imani's eyes were sharp like hawk eyes. "Help to do what?" Madam Sod leaned in. "There is a girl. Nia. She is taking my daughter's future. I need something to ruin her luck." Grandmother Imani remained silent. Madam Sod continued, getting bolder. "Maybe make her ugly. Make her undesirable. Make the man stop loving her." Grandmother Imani's voice dropped low. "Do you know what you are asking?" Madam Sod snapped, "I am asking for justice." Grandmother Imani chuckled, one short, dry laugh. "Justice," she repeated. "Wickedness always calls itself justice." Madam Sod's face hardened. "Old woman, do you want payment or not?" Grandmother Imani stood slowly. She walked into her hut and returned with a small gourd. She handed it to Madam Sod. "Take this," she said. "But listen carefully." Madam Sod's eyes gleamed. "Yes." Grandmother Imani pointed one bony finger. "What you send out will return. And what you deserve will find you." Madam Sod rolled her eyes. "Fine." She left quickly, already planning the evil. But Grandmother Imani watched her go, whispering to the trees. "Let the truth speak through the body." The next morning, Madam Sod mixed the gourd's contents into Nia's bathing water. She smiled to herself. "Now you will lose him," she whispered. Nia bathed, feeling nothing strange, only the usual tiredness. Madam Sod waited. Nothing happened. Binta waited too. Then Binta complained, "Mama, maybe it didn't work." Madam Sod snapped, "Be patient." But by afternoon, something began. Binta was applying oil to her face when she screamed, "Mama!" Madam Sod rushed in. Binta pointed at her reflection. Her nose looked slightly longer. "Maybe it's the light," Madam Sod said. But the next hour, the nose looked longer again. Binta started to panic. Then Madam Sod felt something tight in her sandal. She removed her foot. Her toes looked stretched. She blinked, confused. She stood up. Her foot pressed the ground strangely, like it was expanding. "Binta," Madam Sod whispered. Binta's nose kept growing. And Madam Sod's foot kept growing too. Not fast like a sudden explosion, but steadily. Like a plant forced to sprout. By evening, Binta's nose had become noticeably big, like the beak of a bird. And Madam Sod's foot had grown so long she could barely fit in her sandals. They both stared at each other in horror. Binta cried, "Mama! Fix it!" Madam Sod trembled. It was meant for Nia. And that was when the truth hit her like a drum. The magic did not punish the innocent. It punished the guilty. But wickedness is stubborn. Even when it bleeds. Madam Sod did not decide to repent. She decided to hide it. The next day, coffee came with elders, ready to take Nia officially. Madam Sod wrapped cloth tightly around Binta's nose and claimed she had a bad sickness. She also refused to come outside much, hiding her growing foot under a long wrapper. When Kofi's elders asked to see Madam Sod properly, she forced herself out, smiling through sweat. "My child Nia," she announced. Yes, she can marry." Nia froze. Kofi looked relieved. But Madam Sod added quickly. "However, before she leaves, she must complete one final duty, go to the forest stream and bring back water from the sacred stones. It is tradition." The elders exchanged looks. Kofi frowned. "I've never heard of this tradition." Madam Sod smiled too hard. In our family line, it is done. If she refuses, misfortune will follow." Nia felt fear twist in her stomach. The forest stream was far. And people said strange things happened there. Kofi opened his mouth to protest, but Nia softly touched his arm. "It's okay," she whispered, not wanting a fight. "I'll go." Kofi didn't like it. But he nodded. "I'm coming with you." Madam Sod quickly interrupted, "No. It must be done alone." "Alone?" Kofi's eyes sharpened. "Why?" Madam Sod's voice shook. Because the spirits demand it." Kofi stared. Then, slowly, he said, "Fine. But I will wait at the edge of the forest. If you do not return quickly, they will come in." Madam Sod forced a smile. Inside her mind, she was thinking something else. If Nia disappears, Kofi will have to look at Binta. And the curse. Madam Sod believed if she could just marry Binta off quickly, the shame of her growing foot wouldn't matter. Wicked people always think they can outrun consequences. Nia walked into the forest alone. The trees grew thicker. The air cooled. The sunlight became thin lines on the ground. Birds stopped singing. Nia held her calabash tight. When she reached the stream, she found the sacred stones Madam Sod had described. She knelt to scoop water. And that's when she heard a voice behind her. "Child." Nia turned sharply. An old woman stood there, thin but strong, eyes bright like moonlight. It was Grandmother Imani. Nia swallowed. "Good afternoon, Ma." The old woman studied her face. "You are Nia." Nia blinked. "Yes, Ma." Grandmother Imani nodded slowly. They did not break your spirit. Nia's throat tightened. I try. The old woman stepped closer. Your stepmother came to me. Nia froze. Grandmother Imani continued, she asked for evil. Evil refused to sit in her hands. So it sat on her body instead. Nia looked confused. Grandmother Imani lifted her chin. The nose and the foot. Nia's eyes widened. So it's true. Grandmother Imani gave a small smile. The village will know soon. Nia trembled. Ma. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted peace. Grandmother Imani's voice softened. Peace without truth is only quiet suffering. Then she touched Nia's forehead lightly. Go back. Do not fear. Today, truth will walk openly. Nia stood, calabash filled, a heart pounding. As she walked back, she felt something new inside her. Not anger. Not revenge. But strength. When Nia returned to the forest edge, Kofi rushed to her. Are you okay? Nia nodded. Yes. Kofi scanned her face. You're shaking. Nia opened her mouth to finally speak. But before she could, they heard screaming from the village. A crowd was gathering near Madame Soda's home. Kofi and Nia ran. And when they arrived, the hidden cars had refused to stay hidden. Binta's nose had grown so large the cloth covering it had slipped off. People gasped. Some laughed nervously. Others stepped back like they feared catching it. Then Madame Sod stumbled out, limping, unable to hide her foot anymore. Her foot had grown so long it looked unnatural, like it belonged to a giant. Someone shouted, "Eh! What is this?" Madame Sod screamed, "Everybody get away from my house." But the crowd only grew. Kofi stared, stunned. His elders whispered prayers under their breath. Nia stood still, tears in her eyes, and not from joy, but from the painful truth of seeing cruelty exposed. Then Grandmother Imani appeared, walking through the crowd like the air made space for her. She lifted her voice. This is what happens when envy becomes food. This is what happens when wickedness becomes a daily habit. The body will confess what the mouth refuses. Madame Sod pointed at Nia like a mad woman. It's her. She did this. Grandmother Imani shook her head. No. You did. Binta cried, "Fix me. Fix me." Grandmother Imani stared at them both. Did you ever say sorry to the girl you harmed? Silence. Madame Soda's eyes darted, desperate. Then, like a drowning person grabbing anything, she shouted. Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Grandmother Imani's gaze didn't soften. Sorry is not a word to escape shame. Sorry is a doorway. And you must walk through it with truth. She turned to Nia. Child, speak. Nia's hands shook. Kofi looked at her gently. Nia, tell me. And Nia, finally, said everything. The forced labor. The insults. The lies. The threats. The attempted exile. Kofi's face grew darker with every word. When she finished, he turned to Madame Sod. You were eating her life in your home, he said quietly. And you thought I would marry into this. Madame Sod tried to talk, but her words collapsed. Grandmother Imani lifted her staff. The curse will stop growing, she declared, only if you restore what you stole. Madame Sod whimpered, what do you mean? Grandmother Imani pointed toward Nia. Her dignity. Her belonging. Her peace. The village waited. Madame Sod swallowed hard. Then, in front of everyone, she said the words that tasted like bitter leaves. Nia, you are free. Binta sobbed. Grandmother Imani nodded once. And slowly, the growth stopped. Not reversed. Just stopped. Because some consequences don't disappear. They become reminders. That same week, Kofi's family returned properly. This time, Madame Sod could not block it. Nia packed her small cloth bundle. As she stepped out of the house, she paused and looked at Madame Sod and Binta. They stood there, changed, Binta with an enormous nose she now had to live with, Madame Sod limping slightly, her foot still too large for normal sandals. Nia didn't laugh. She didn't mock. She simply said, "I pray you find a better way to live." And she walked away with Kofi. The village women ululated. Drums played. Children ran behind them. For the first time in years, Nia felt sunlight touch her like love instead of punishment. Nia and Kofi's wedding was not a wedding of riches. It was a wedding of truth. People brought yams, cola, palm wine, and cloth. Elders blessed them. Women sang songs that praised patience and warned against envy. And Grandmother Imani attended quietly, sitting in the back, smiling like someone who had seen the end before the beginning. After the wedding, as Nia and Kofi sat together under the stars, Kofi said softly, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Nia looked down. "I was scared. I didn't want you to see me as trouble." Kofi touched her hand. "You were never trouble. You were being troubled." Nia's eyes filled again. And Kofi whispered, "From today, you will never suffer in silence again." Back in Madame Soda's house, things were never the same. Binta stopped going to market often because people stared. Some laughed. Some whispered. And for once, the attention that Binta always craved became a punishment. Madame Sod also changed. Not because she suddenly became sweet, but because she had learned something she could not ignore. Magic listens. Truth follows. And wickedness always collects payment. Over time, Madame Sod began to treat others differently, afraid the world itself might punish her again. But her foot stayed large. Binta's nose stayed big. They became walking warnings. And mothers in the village would tell their daughters, "Do not let jealousy grow inside you, or it will grow on you." So if you are listening to this story tonight, remember, a wicked heart may hide for a season, but not forever. When you mistreat someone who has done you no harm, you may think no one sees. But the universe sees. And sometimes, the punishment is not death, but the shame of being exposed while still alive. Because in the end, it wasn't Nia's beauty that defeated Madame Sod and Binta. It wasn't Kofi's love. It was simple truth. And truth has a way of making even the body speak.